we have a few under our belts now at this point. So I was just curious myself to see like, what do you guys typically do before you record, or do you have any routines or anything like that?
Well, you should talk about yours first because mine's related to that. So,
Oh, is it?
yeah.
Okay, yeah, I can go first. So typically, what I like to do is I'll watch the movie, whatever the topic's going to be, at least a day before. But I prefer to do it like somewhere between a couple weeks to a day before. So after that, I'll just do like a quick kind of almost like synopsis of like the entire movie. It's mainly just bullet points, right? I just type that out and then I send that to you, both you guys. I go in and I just add my whatever notes that I kind of want to talk about or things I found interesting, because obviously I want you guys to come up with your own stuff, and then I just kind of sprinkle mine in there at like appropriate times. I'll listen to the soundtrack just before we start recording, so that way I'm just like I'm feeling it, I'm vibing with it.
Hmm.
Obviously I have stuff like I have the intro, like ready to go, and then I pull up my notes and everything, and I set up the little chat for us, the little video conference. I basically just randomly hit record as we're talking, so that way it just picks up, in the middle of a conversation, and then I just gather all that. I think it's a lot of fun to have just us with our guard down before we start recording, before we're serious and are like getting into the actual episode. I like being able to talk a little bit about like what's going on with us, or like just mess around, hanging out.
Shooting the shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell Andrew, I'm like, oh yeah, we always shoot the shit before we actually start talking about the movie. But if the kids are around, then I just say chit chat.
Gotcha.
Yoga. Hmm.
So yeah, for me, it's everything you just said. Moving on. At the very beginning, years ago when we started this, because it's literally been years now, I used to also take notes, and then after a while, I realized that my notes were just your notes, so I just started using your notes.
Okay. Do you also add your own to the ones that I
I
send
don't
out?
add to it. I'll just remember. I mean, I feel like it'll either just come up naturally in conversation, or if it doesn't, then it doesn't. Because I'm not going to try and force things in there if it's not. And I feel like if I put in my own things, then I might try and force it when it's not natural. So I like to watch the movie no less than a week before. I mean, no more than a week before, a week
Hmm.
to the day of, some in some cases.
Mhm,
Because if
mhm.
I go more than a week, then I'll start forgetting it because I have a horrible memory. But as long as I watch it and it's pretty fresh in my mind, then it's not a problem. As long like I could just follow along with your notes and have stuff to talk about. If I feel like I need to, or if there's something else I know I want to talk about, then I'll do research.
But you don't write that down? You just remember the research?
Well, I mean, if it's like an article or something like that, like I'll have it open on my phone so I can reference it if I need to or
Oh,
something like that.
Mm,
But
mhm, mhm.
um, yeah, just pretty much that I do write down. Definitely, if we talk about something, while we're recording, and we're like, okay, yeah, we're gonna post that on socials later or something like that, then I'll write that down, or I will forget.
here's why I like to write mine down as we kind of cover the topic, is because so many times early on in our like first 10 episodes, there were times where after like a few days after we recorded, I'm like, fuck, I was gonna talk about that and I forgot to bring it up, and that kept happening. So I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna write it down so that way I won't forget and I'll actually cover it.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I think I used to do that at the beginning, but after a while, now I'm just like, oh, it didn't come up. It didn't come up. I prefer kind of the natural flow of conversation, and what comes up is what comes up, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. And maybe we can cover it in socials if it's something we can throw in the socials or something.
Yeah,
But
that's definitely an option. If we possibly forget about it in the episode, then maybe we can turn that into a social post. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, I do the same thing, very similar to what Steph does. Um, I really like to use your notes as a way to know like where we're heading in terms of like if we're on a ship, you're the navigator. We know what points we're going to hit eventually, and I can look ahead and go, okay, these are kind of the big plot points that are going to come up, and it lets me know if there's something that I wanted to address before we change to the next thing. I'll be like, oh, he's going to talk about this in this chunk, and if I see that we're starting to move on from that or whatever,
Mhm.
or it just jogs my mind, okay, this is coming up, I'm going to want to bring this thing up, then I'll do that. in the beginning, I really just relied. I didn't really take notes at all. I just relied because so many of them, aside from Tenet, were movies that I had seen before and already had kind of impressions of. But ever since, well, it's been a few movies now. I can't remember the first movie I really started taking notes on. I take little scratch notes, like just little snippets here and there. And then of course I tried doing visual notes, and then what I started finding though in experimenting with it, again, no regrets, no regrets.
As your invisible ink tattoo shows.
My ink tattoo shows right here on my collarbone. But yeah, I'm toying with it. I'm playing with like what works best given the type of story that's being told, and certain plot. I didn't want to get too bogged down because there's so many notes that I ended up taking that I guess it's better to have more than
More content.
none, I suppose. Yeah, because then I can. It's almost like it gets compressed. The more information you have, I mean, it's not just about the amount. It's about like, okay, things start to make connections. There's these the way the mind works. Being in ENFP slash undiagnosed ADD, I have like this divergent thinking. I will make connections to seemingly disparate things, and I rely so much on the conversation itself. So, having these different things that I've already connected to, then on top of that, having the conversation and getting your guys' insights, then helps me to see things and think about things differently than I had before and never would have otherwise thought of before.
I feel like that's often the case when I'm watching a movie for the podcast because I pay attention in a different way than
Mm-hmm.
I do. I mean, it could be a movie I've seen, tens of times, like a Goofy movie or something like that, or a
Oh,
Greasy
right,
movie.
right, right.
I've seen them so many times, but I pay attention in a different way when I'm watching it for the podcast, I think.
Same.
Different mindset. Okay. Hopefully, it doesn't take away from the experience, though.
No, it usually adds to it because I'm trying really hard to make sure that I get like every little every, I'm absorbing as much as I can so that I don't miss anything, I guess.
Mm.
But like when we did Interstellar, I definitely I think I developed a deeper appreciation for it when I watched it for the podcast because I was paying attention so hard that I actually got it.